Good afternoon, everyone. I am Bhagya Sodem, and I am your host for today's session. A very warm welcome to all of you for this meditation workshop series on Rising Above Crisis, Build Resilience and Sustain Joy. During this workshop series, you will learn some heartfulness techniques and tools to help cope with the turbulent times that we're all going through currently. Today, we will cover the second topic in this workshop series on how to build resilience by releasing stress and developing inner strength. Our speaker for today's session is Ravi Venkatesan. Before we get started with the session, I would like to go through a couple of meeting guidelines. If you have any questions as we go through this session today, please use the Q&A icon on your Zoom screen. It's at the bottom center. We do expect to have some time at the end of the session for Q&A. Our speaker, Ravi, he will try to address some of your questions then, depending on the time that's available. Now, if you do have additional questions that we are not able to get to, please feel free to email bayarea.ca@heartfulness.org. We also have some heartfulness trainers on this call here that will also try and respond to some of your questions. Okay, moving on. We covered the topic of regaining calm in last Friday's session. Today, we'll focus on building resilience. Next week, we'll discuss cultivating gratitude. And then in the final session, we'll get to sustaining joy. We received several questions last Friday on whether we covered the same techniques or different techniques in these sessions. And the answer is we teach different techniques in each of these sessions, and they're all building blocks that can help us strengthen and deepen our meditation experience. So we recommend that you try and attend all of these sessions. Now we know life happens and you may end up with some schedule conflicts. If that happens and you're only able to attend one or more of these sessions, that's fine too. But they still do offer great benefit as standalone sessions, and you can apply these practices at home. I would now like to introduce our speaker for today's session. Ravi Venkatesan. He is based in Atlanta. He is a heartfulness coach, and he is also the head of innovation at BUCT. He's a regular public speaker on technology and wellness topics, both in US as well as globally. He's also a public speaking coach, and he is a regular participant at various corporate events in US and globally. So I'm really pleased to welcome Ravi to the session today. Over to you, Ravi.
Thank you, Bhagya. Really nice to be here with everybody and to do this session. And it's delightful to see so many people take some time out and log in on a Friday afternoon to invest in yourself, which is really what we're about to do here. And as Bhagya mentioned, most of the people that teach heartfulness techniques, including myself, have day jobs, and mine is to lead innovation for BACT. And just by way of my background, it's a digital unicorn, and we all work in different fields. I know in the Bay Area, a lot of you are used to technology and in other places. I'm from a technology background as well and have led technology companies and done multiple startups. So in that sense, no stranger to stress and no stranger to challenges, even before the situation we are currently in with COVID-19. So what I want to do is really take you on a journey today, and together we'll go through a definition of why do we believe that stress is a challenge for us right now? And by the way, we don't want to avoid or eliminate stress. It's a way of life. It's going to come at us. If it's not COVID-19, if it's not a recession, if it's not artificial intelligence taking people's jobs, there will be something that comes at us. So we are not trying to eliminate stress. What we are trying to do is figure out, how do we understand the problems that stress causes, and how do we build resilience in ourselves so that we can overcome that problem and, quite frankly, take advantage of stress. Because remember, if you're trying to build muscle, you can't build muscle without stress. So just as if you're trying to improve your health, you work out, you build muscle, which essentially is that you're building up your resilience, and now your ability to take more stress is improved. That's exactly the same thing that we need on the mental and emotional levels, right? We build muscles to improve our physical health. Now what we are about to dive into is, how do we improve our mental and emotional health? And how do we build this emotional muscle and resilience to deal with stress? That's the journey we'll go on. You can see the agenda in front of you today. We'll dive a little bit into what are the vectors of stress, how does it come to us? Where does it come from? We'll also talk a little bit about this concept of impressions. What is it? Why do we care? How do we deal with it? And why are impressions key to building this emotional resilience? So we'll go into a little bit of that. And then I'll spend a good amount of time in really taking you through a practical experience of what we call the heartfulness rejuvenation or cleansing practice, which is really a way to deal with these impressions and deal with stress and actually start to build that resilience. So we'll do a practical session also. And that way you'll have a very powerful tool in your toolkit that you can kind of take away from this session and use on an ongoing basis. Okay. Jumping right in. So there are many definitions of resilience. For the purpose of this session, we're going to narrow it deliberately. So our focus today is, how do we recover quickly from stress? Stress will come, as I said before. It'll impact us, it'll affect us. There's nothing we can do about those things. What we can do is to build that ability to say, when it comes, how do we quickly recover? First thing to understand there is, stress is one thing, but it has a lot of associates. It comes with the feelings of discontent, disengagement, loneliness, burnout. All these things are part of this sort of negative emotions set that comes with stress. A lot of times resistance to change as well. In many cases in organizations, people have conversations about, oh yeah, this set of employees or this person over here is very resistant to change. And sometimes if you double click, you'll discover that they're under a lot of stress, which causes that tendency to create blocks, causes that tendency to stonewall or go into a shell or protect ourselves. So one of the important things to understand is, while stress is one thing, it comes with all these associates. And by the way, I know we are talking about mental and emotional side of stress, but remember, if stress is left unchecked, and research shows that in America today, the average adult goes through anywhere between 7 to 11 cases of chronic stress attacks. And what does that mean? It could be something as simple as you're driving on the road and somebody cuts in, and you feel that, that little feeling that comes to you. That's actually an acute stress attack that happens in that moment. And over time, this can develop into chronic. But when 7 to 11 of those things happen, and they have all kinds of negative effects in your physical system, they increase production of cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine, bad things that lead to tunnel vision, that lead to loss of focus. So while it's mental and emotional, it actually can affect your physical health if it's unchecked. So the techniques we're going to talk about are beneficial to tackle it from the root, but actually do have a benefit from a physical health perspective also. So let's talk a little bit about, okay, we've got some understanding of stress. We know it's a bad thing. We know it's going to come at us. Nothing we can do about it. How does it come at us? Or what are the vectors? What are the sources that it comes from? This is a little bit funny, but one of the number one source people talk about a lot of times is their boss, whoever at the workplace. It's whoever you're reporting to. And in some cases, it's the other boss, at home that stress can come from. So it can come from any of these. And sometimes it's kids, it's the family, and sometimes it's parents, and sometimes it's friends, colleagues. So it can come from all these cases. And then there are things we are worried about. Health. Health is a big stress vector now, whether it's issues that people have, they're trying to manage chronic conditions, or in our current situation, they're worried about contracting a pandemic that's out there. They're concerned about going to a restaurant. They're concerned about going to a shop. So health is a huge, huge source of stress, and not just current health concerns, but also potential health concerns. Finances is another big one. Money matters. We worry about, do we have enough money for retirement? Do we have enough money for our children? All those career-related things. Are we where we want to be? A lot of times people feel that years have gone by or decades have gone by and they haven't made the career progress that they aspired to, and that there is more time that has been lost than gains that have happened in this field. So all these, and this is not a comprehensive list, this is just to give you some grounding in this concept that stress comes at us from many different sources and many different vectors. So maybe this is a good time to pause and do a little poll with all of us to see what are the sources of stress that we encounter on a day-to-day basis. So if you take a minute or a quick second rather and respond to what are your sources? Where does stress come at you from? And we should hopefully see that in a second. And as we are waiting for this, also think about, when it comes from all these sources, are there differences? For some of us, we'll say, hey, you know what? I can have all the stress in the world at work. I can deal with it. But when I come home, I feel good and I'm at peace. But if I have anything happen at home, I really can't cope up with it. I've heard this from many of my friends. And there are some people for whom, it's the opposite. They have a high tolerance for stress when it comes to family, but very low tolerance for stress when it comes to workplace related stress. So these are all, okay, here are the results there. And not surprisingly, workplace stress is high. And I bet if I had more specifically cast that as the boss, a lot of it comes from people that we work for, comes from colleagues and peers, comes from others. And most of those challenges are because we struggle with workplace relationships. How do we build, nurture, and maintain workplace relationships? But that's a topic for another day almost. So give you a second to consume this. I think it's very interesting and very instructive that these are what we all have responded to as the most common vectors from where stress comes to us. So what do we do about it? We know that it's a problem. We know it's a complex problem. It has multiple dimensions to it. As we saw in the previous slide, it comes from multiple sources. So how do we tackle it? Before we dive right into saying, okay, how do I tackle stress? It's useful to understand what exactly does it do inside us? And how do we even look inside to understand what it does? If I told you, or asked you rather, how do you feel and I asked you that question in physical terms. Do you feel healthy? Do you feel ill? Do you feel cold? Do you feel warm? You know, do you feel tired? Do you feel hungry? Easy to answer, right? But if I ask you, do you feel peaceful? A lot of us pause, like, "Oh, I don't know if I feel peaceful or not." If I ask you, do you feel settled? Do you feel centered? The more that question becomes, it shifts from the physical to the mental to the psychic planes, the more difficulty we have in answering it, because we are not tuned to looking at ourselves inside. We are tuned to looking at ourselves from the body's perspective. So one of the tools I'm going to give you today is, how do you take a snapshot of your inner state? This is a picture where I'm going to describe to you what we call the heart-mind vibrational field. And the heart in this case is not the physical heart that's pumping away. And the mind is not the brain that has all these neurons that are firing and the connections that they have. When we say heart here, we are talking about the seat of feelings and emotions within us. If I say, I feel angry, where is that anger? You can't locate it at a point in your physical body. It is not a physical thing, but it is in you. It's there. So the seat of those feelings and emotions, broadly speaking, we call it the heart. And the seat of all the thoughts and ideas and the reasoning and all those mental processes, even though we say, yeah, that's my brain, it's not really your physical brain. If I say I have a thought about something, I can't locate that thought in my physical brain. It's in the mind, which is not a physical thing. So this heart-mind vibrational field is what we call the inner state. And to understand what is going on in that field, because ultimately stress affects that heart-mind vibrational field, we look at what are the elements there. And broadly, if you notice this picture, it's categorized into 3 parts. Prior disposition, which is, what do you bring with you? All of you have brought a prior disposition even to this webinar, right? When you came in, it may not be on top of your conscious mind, but there are some likes and dislikes you have. Some of you may like Van Gogh paintings, and others may like classical music, and somebody else may like running. Whatever it may be, there are some likes and dislikes. There is some guilt, there is some shame, there are desires, there are worries and concerns. Everything that you brought with you, call it emotional baggage, call it your the way you've been built in terms of your personality, that's all your prior disposition. It's there, it's sitting there. The feelings and emotions that you experience at any given point in time, you may feel very restless and you may not even know why, or you may feel some unknown anxiety. All these things contribute to your inner state. So that's the second portion. The third is this wonderful mind of ours, which is unable to stay at rest, because its tendency is to continuously breed thoughts. And sometimes those thoughts are in reaction to what is coming in from the external world, whether it is through the 5 senses, we are perceiving different things, or somebody saying something to us, like you're listening to what I'm saying right now, and your mind has its own script that it's running. It's judging what I'm saying, it's evaluating, it's drawing conclusions. Your ego is at work. It's updating your mental model of yourself, saying, yeah, I like this, or I don't like it, or this is all bullshit. Whatever it is, your mind is at work. It's not standstill. And all those thoughts, ideas, the reasoning that's happening, the judgment that's happening, that's the mental side of it. So now that I've dumped a bunch of information on you, and I know this is dense, let's take a minute here and I'll show you some questions that you can answer for yourself. Don't try to answer all of these. Just answer a couple of them that speak to you or that resonate with you. Like take this prior disposition and just pick one of these questions and answer it for yourself. We're not going to share it. We're not going to talk about it. This is for yourself. Just either make a mental note or note it down on your computer or your phone or your notebook if you've got one. Let's go into feelings and emotions. Again, pick one or two of those questions and answer them for yourself. Don't try to drain this. And we will make materials available to you later. So don't worry about trying to remember everything or capture everything. So by looking inside and answering these questions, you are effectively taking a snapshot of your inner state. You can also consider this as taking a snapshot of your consciousness itself. And consciousness is a topic which is deep and broad and onto itself, and we could spend hours on that. But suffice to say for this session that when you do this, you are effectively taking a snapshot of your consciousness. Okay? So now that we've done this, and there's a reason we've done this, as we go through a practical session, we will look at what effect that practical session had on your inner state. Okay? So let's now talk a little bit about this concept of impressions, which are what impact that inner state. So we learned what inner state is. We talked a little bit about what stress is and how stress works, but how does stress manifest itself to change the inner state? And that game is all about how we form impressions. So if you think about our day, a single day, right? We wake up in the morning and we are like this video camera that's recording every single thing, every waking hour, right? We have interactions with other people. You read a book, you watch a movie, you drive to work, whatever you do, every waking moment, you're recording everything like a video camera. The one difference is, if you were a camera, you're only capturing sights and sounds, whereas we are recording through 5 senses. We are recording smells and touch, feeling, and taste, and all kinds of things. When you eat food, you're recording the taste of it. So our recording is much, much more sophisticated than a simple poor video camera. So where does all this stuff go that we are recording? There are 2 aspects to it, right? And by the way, while we are recording all these things that are coming in from external input, our mind is also constantly generating ideas, and we're recording those as well. So that's almost another source. All of this content has 2 aspects, right? And they're related, but they are also different in a way. And the 2 aspects are, there's memories. We all have memories, and those memories are just facts. And there's short-term memory and long-term memory. Initially, it's all formed in short-term memory. Eventually, it goes into long-term memory. A very small portion, by the way. Most of it comes into short-term memory and then just vanishes. We don't remember it. The memories are just simple facts. They don't carry any emotion with them. And they don't really bother us. We can recall them like a robot or a computer, which you can feed some memories and it'll recall it. It doesn't feel anything. It's just recalling. If I was a robot, I would recall the most traumatic experience I have had and the most joyful experience I've had in the same manner. I would just matter-of-factly repeat it, like you've seen some of the robots repeat it. But because I'm a human being with emotions, if I think about a traumatic experience I've had, my life's most traumatic experience is I lost my dad in an accident when I was 17. And even today, if I think about that experience, the feeling associated with that experience comes to me immediately. The knots in the stomach, the feeling of the entire world shrinking, the disastrous feeling, that emotion comes right back like this. But it's not happening now. It happened, 25 years ago. Why do I feel about it like that? It's because the memory and the impression associated with it are together, the emotion. But if we could somehow separate the emotion from the memory and just look at that emotional part and somehow unburden ourselves of it, get rid of those impressions of the past, wouldn't that be wonderful? And that's exactly where we are going. So the emotional part or that aspect of what we record are what are called impressions. And the impressions can be, sometimes superficial and they evaporate quickly, like you saw something or you had a conversation, but really you didn't really care about it that much and it's gone. Whereas typically, let's say you saw a movie and there was a murder scene in that movie and it really impacted it's giving you nightmares. You're thinking about it, not being able to go to sleep sometimes, or 3 days later, you're still obsessing over that scene and what happened there, and it's bothering you. That's a deeper impression. Some impressions are so deep that they last decades. They may even last multiple lives. Whether you believe in multiple lives or not is another topic, but impressions can persist and they can affect us without us even knowing that we are carrying them at a subconscious level. So now that we've talked about stress a little bit, we talked about inner state and how do we take a snapshot, and then what are impressions. Let's bring these things together. When stress attacks us from the vectors that we talked about, what really happens is that impressions are formed on our heart-mind vibrational field. And when these impressions are formed on us, they alter our inner state. So when an impression is formed and it deepens, it can make us angry. It can make us anxious. It can make us depressed. So stress comes at us, and whatever vector it comes at us from, it causes these impressions to be formed. The problem is not stress itself. The problem is our inability to deal with these impressions. I'll repeat again. We have an inner state. Let's assume for a moment that inner state is calm, peaceful, in a wonderful state right now. Stress comes at us. Somebody insults us, okay? Or somebody makes some demands which are unreasonable. Boss says, tomorrow you need to deliver this. And we know it's going to be crazy. We have to work 18 hours to deliver that. That's stress. It comes at us. But is it the act itself or the ask itself, or is it as soon as that came, it now created an impression that's now causing anger, that's now causing all sorts of things. So that impression that stress created has altered my inner state. And now my inner state has changed, which is where the real problem is. It has left me restless. It has left me fearful, angry. It's left me discontent. All those things are the challenges. Okay. Again, I know we went through all of this in turbo speed, but as we go through the practical session is where a lot of it is going to come to life. So the practical session we go through, which is called Heartfulness Rejuvenation. And by the way, one last point on impressions is all these impressions that we form throughout a given day, if we don't deal with them, resolve them somehow, and we sleep, what happens is they go from our active consciousness, which is what is active when we are awake, to our subconscious level, which is what is active when we are asleep. So when we sleep and navigate from active consciousness to dream state and deep sleep state, these impressions also sink to those levels. And everything that sinks becomes heavier. So they become more and more difficult to deal with if we don't resolve them during that day. Okay. So with that, let's jump a little bit into the solution that we are offering today. The heartfulness rejuvenation process, quite simply put, is a mental process where we will use our own willpower to remove these impressions that have been accumulated through the day. Think of it as taking a mental shower. You take a physical shower, you remove all the dirt that you've accumulated during the day. This is a mental shower and an emotional shower where you remove all these impressions. We've talked about this already. Why do we do this? We want to prevent all these impressions from deepening, from descending into our subconsciousness, and over time creating more heaviness. In terms of the technique itself, and you don't have to pay attention to this, it's just based on suggestion, and a suggestion that we want to become pure and simple. And so we want to get rid of all impurities and complexities. And I'll walk you through this, so don't worry about trying to follow this right now. And as you do this regularly, you'll start feeling the lightness that comes after doing it. And it paves the way for being able to do effective meditation. And of course, builds the resilience to deal with stress as it continues to come at you. Okay. With that, I'm actually going to shift us into a practical session here, and I'll stop sharing my screen so that we can shift into really focusing on what we're going to go through here. Okay. So what I would like you to do now is get into a very comfortable posture. Make sure that you are very relaxed. If necessary, scan yourself from the top of your head to your feet and ensure that you're relaxed. And just follow along with the voice prompts I give you. Make sure your eyes are gently closed, not too firmly. Have this idea that you want your inner state to become pure and simple, and to be free of impressions which are the results of any stress that has come at you. To make this happen, imagine that any complexities and impurities that have been accumulated, they are all being released from your back in the form of vapor. In other words, let them evaporate from you. Envision your back from the top of your skull to your tailbone. So take the entire back and the back of the head. And imagine that these complexities and impurities are going out from that part of your body as vapor. Now mentally accelerate this process as if you're stepping on a gas pedal. Push all of these complexities and impurities faster. Let them go out from the back. Keep focusing on this idea for a few minutes. As you continue to do this, you are also creating some inner vacuum by letting these impressions evaporate. Add a suggestion that light from the source is coming in and filling this vacuum, further helping you to rejuvenate and creating a light, pure and simple condition inside you. Continue with both thoughts. Complexity and impurities going out and light coming in. Now have this firm conviction that as a result of this process, every cell in your body has become purified and your inner state has become light, calm, and peaceful. Enjoy this state for a few seconds. Open your eyes gently and come back to this world, bringing a wonderful, rejuvenated self into it. I've been doing this simple practice for 25 years, but every time I do it, it still creates such wonderful calm. It's become an indispensable part of my life day to day. And I hope that you'll find equal value in it and make this simple 10-15 minute exercise part of your daily life. Do it in the evening after most of the day's work has been completed. That's the best time to do it. And don't worry about remembering all this. We'll share resources with you, including YouTube videos that can take you through it just as I did. And so you'll easily be able to access this practice. With that, we'll conclude the content that we wanted to cover and then shift back for some questions. Over to you, Bhagya.
Thank you, Ravi. If you want to bring up the resources slide, I'd like to go through it. But that was a very insightful talk and a very relaxing session on rejuvenation. I feel so light and relaxed now. So thank you for doing that. Before I cover the resources and before we get to Q&A, we'd love to hear from you and get some feedback on how you felt today during the experience portion of it as well as the talk. Please take a few seconds to respond to the poll questions that you see on your Zoom screen. And while you do this, let me walk you through a few resources that Ravi was alluding to in his talk. We have this website, heartfulnessinstitute.org/experience. And as you see on your slide here, there are several videos available. And these are videos that you can play and listen to and follow along when you do the meditation, relaxation meditation, as well as the rejuvenation exercise that Ravi walked us through today. And this will hopefully help you, it will supplement your practice, it will guide you through the practices as you do that at home. On to the right, you see a heartfap.org link, and that's our free app from Heartfulness Institute. You can use this to work with another Heartfulness trainer for one-on-one meditation sitting. And there are several other resources available on this app. So again, it's free, so you can leverage any of these resources that are on the website as well as on the app. There's also the heartspots.heartfulness.org. This is an excellent resource as well. You can find a trainer, Heartfulness trainer, that's close to where you live, and you can connect with them. They can answer your questions. They can also support your meditation practice and work with you and guide you through your meditation experience. And finally, on the resources, we have the Heartfulness magazine that comes out with wonderful articles related to wellness and life in general, and certainly related to meditation. So you will find that a valuable tool as well. This is also free. So feel free to visit and make use of that. And apart from the poll that you just answered, feel free to share your thoughts, your comments on this session on the chat window, Zoom chat window. We'd love to hear your comments. And let's go through a few questions now. Questions have started coming in. Ravi?
Sure.
Let's see. Several questions about recording. And Ravi did mention earlier that we will share. There are obviously all of these resources on the Heartfulness Institute website. But in addition, we are planning to share these recordings of these sessions in the workshop series towards the end of the series. So we will share those with you. So no worries there. Some of you have also asked for slides, the same answer there as well. We'll be sharing that. There is a question here. Meditation is effective for me in reducing stress, but do you have any advice on actively managing stress during the day? For me, it very easily seems to get out of control, and I don't always feel like I have 15 minutes to meditate to reduce it to manageable levels again.
I love that question. It's a very good question. And there are two ideas I want to share with you. One is this classic technique of just pausing is always very powerful. So no matter what it is, insert a pause, even if it's for a few seconds before you react. Because a lot of times it's not what's coming at us, but it's what's coming from within us in response to what's coming at us. Right? So it's our reaction which really creates that stress. So just pausing a little bit helps a lot. The other technique is this rejuvenation that we went through, or this cleansing technique. I took you through it in an elaborate manner, and we took about 10 minutes to do it. But you can do it in the moment, even with your eyes open. So let's say you are in the situation where something's happened, and you don't have 15 minutes to go meditate. You don't have you're not in a place where you can sit down and rejuvenate yourself. Still have this mental suggestion that all these impressions are just going out from my back and in the form of vapor, and focus on that idea for 30 seconds, 1 minute, and then you'll immediately feel a certain lightness and come back to your center and your equanimity.
Thank you, Ravi. That's a good tip. Another question about the cleaning or rejuvenation exercise that we just did. Do we have to remember the exact impression and work on it actively while we're doing the cleaning?
Good question again. See, if you're taking a shower, will you say, oh, you know what, I played in the mud there, and here there's a little bit of mud, let me wipe it here, and then I probably acquired some dust from that place, so let me do. No, you just open the shower and you let it wipe everything out, right? Or clean everything out. This is like that. In fact, it's counterproductive to remember specific impressions, because memory will enliven the impression. You can, just think about it this way. I described a memory that was traumatic for me. If I keep thinking about that memory, I'm going to relive it. I'm going to enliven the impression. I'm making the impression stronger. So the better thing to do is clean in a general way, or go through this rejuvenation process in a general way without focusing on or remembering specific impressions. As you do it, some things will no doubt come up in your mind, because you're removing it, and sometimes your mind will focus on it. But don't let your mind stay on it. Let it keep going out and keep doing this work. That's the best way to do it.
That makes a lot of sense. So don't focus on individual impressions. Right? There was also another question related to this. So just do the process. It's a generic process. You're addressing all of them.
Correct.
Another question is, would a morning be better as you start your day to do this exercise? This way you're mindful throughout the day.
So the idea, remember, is to make sure that impressions that you accumulate throughout a day don't make their way from your conscious mind into your subconscious mind, where they become deeper, heavier, and more difficult to get rid of. That's why you do it in the evening, so that you can take the accumulation from the entire day and get rid of it before you go to sleep. Now, if you miss doing it in the evening and you feel, you wake up in the morning, there's no harm in taking maybe 5 minutes and doing this briefly in the morning as well. But the ideal time to do it is in the evening.
That makes a lot of sense. So that way we're cleaning and we're light, and as we go to bed, we're going to bed in the right state of mind.
Correct.
Okay, let's see. Several questions. I'm going to have to choose a few. Is it normal to blank out when you try to address these impressions? How long, on an average, is a good time to spend? Will meditation after rejuvenation help?
So meditation after rejuvenation will feel much better, actually, because remember, when you're rejuvenating, you're getting rid of all these impressions, making yourself light and pure. So with that state of mind, when you meditate, the meditation will naturally be better, which is another reason to do this cleaning process or rejuvenation process in the evening, because now you've put yourself in that state, and in the morning you can wake up and meditate. which will make the meditation even more powerful. So that's one answer there. The other is, when you are doing this rejuvenation process, because you are putting yourself in such a calm and pure state, you may have a tendency to slip into meditation, because while you're doing rejuvenation, you are applying your mind, you're applying your willpower, you're trying to allow these impressions to evaporate from the back. But as that lightness sets in, you might just slip into that. That's where the blank comment comes from, or the blankness. But because you're not trying to meditate, it's better in such a case to actually open your eyes for a second, become alert mentally again, and then close your eyes and start this rejuvenation process again. They are fundamentally different processes. When we meditate, we just sit down and we allow something to happen. It is a passive process. When we rejuvenate, we sit down, we have this idea that impressions are going out and evaporating from the back, and we apply our mind, our willpower to it. So it's an active process. Passive and active, mentally, not physically. So rejuvenation is an active mental process. Meditation is a passive mental process. So they're different.
Thank you. Next question. Visualization is a very tough thing for me to do. Is this something that gets better as I try? Or is there something I can do to improve it?
Absolutely. Like everything else, practice makes perfect. And initially it may feel odd, it may feel uncomfortable, it may feel imaginary. That's all okay. Don't need to believe anything, don't need to subscribe to anything. Just do it, right? It's the old Nike mantra. As you do it, over time, you will feel what is happening. And the moment you feel, the need to think goes away, right? So this whole idea of imagining certain things is initially so that you can get to that point where you start feeling what's happening. Once you start feeling what's happening, the mental imagination, words, etc. are meaningless. You sit down and this rejuvenation process will start because you are intending to start it. And then you just let it happen. That's it. But to get to that stage, you have to do it like I just walked you through it.
That sounds good. Another question, this is more tied to meditation. What should I do if during meditation I feel a strong emotion? Should I try to ignore it or explore it or something else?
So definitely do not explore it for the same reason I mentioned earlier, because when that emotion is coming up, it's tied to an impression, and exploring it will only deepen that impression. Sometimes it's hard to ignore it, but the best thing to do is to ignore it. One of our masters who taught this meditation used to say, treat such things as uninvited guests. So you should just try to ignore it, divert your mind and divert your attention.
Makes sense. Let me see. I think there's a question on how we can continue the calmness throughout the day. I think you were referring to that earlier, Ravi.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting question. I see other people have impressions or stereotypes made against me, whether it's my skin color or career or other things. This causes my own impressions to be made afterwards because of how they interacted with me, and especially when I recall how it happened, which can cause a personal negative impression. How can I make an impression positive, or can I do anything about it the next time I meet someone similar?
It's a very thoughtful question, and it's true that when we look at others and the impressions about us that they carry, that in turn affects us, because we are all part of this ecosystem together. We are in it. We can't isolate ourselves. We can't isolate ourselves physically or mentally or emotionally. The best way to deal with it is to try and change our mindset or shift our mindset to be as positive as possible, to shift our inner state to be as light and calm as possible. And just as the negative impressions that because of us, others are carrying, then in turn impact us, the opposite will also happen. If we wish everybody well, if we are internally content, light, and calm, that will permeate outside, and it may take time, but we'll find that others are now very benevolent towards us. They are shifting from being mean to us to being a little caring. Now, this won't happen overnight. Sometimes it takes days, sometimes weeks, sometimes months, and sometimes years, maybe even decades, but it's well worth it to apply ourselves to it. The other concrete thing I would suggest there is think in terms of relationship toxins and vaccines and tonics, right? So there are only 4 things that really impact relationships, especially in the workplace. It's contempt, you feeling contemptuous towards somebody or somebody feeling contempt towards you. Criticism, right? Again, could work both ways. Stonewalling, you say, okay, I'm just going to go into a shell, right? Or defensiveness. And invariably what will happen is these are diagonal kind of opposites. So if one person has contempt for the other person, that other person will be critical of this person. Or if one person is stonewalling, this other person is going to criticize. Or if one person is contemptuous, the other person will be defensive. So they all evoke, one negative emotion will evoke the other negative emotion. So when you are considering impressions that others have about you and you're responding to it, think in terms of what is the relationship toxin that's at play here, and then shift and think about relationship tonics that you can apply, right? Appreciation is a tonic. Have you appreciated this person? Respect is a tonic. Have you respected that person? Right? Compassion is a huge tonic. Have you been compassionate towards that person? So if you understand what is the toxin at play and then you apply tonics, that's a very good way to win in terms of workplace relationships, but also personal relationships.
That's a very helpful tip, Ravi. I like the tonic idea. Easy to remember. While this is hard to practice when during tough, challenging situations, but it is a great tip. I'm going to use that. In the interest of time, I think we need to try and close the call. We just got a minute to 1 p.m. Pacific here. Just want to talk about the upcoming session. We've gone through 2 of these 4-week workshop series. Next week, next Friday, we have Chris Mills, who's going to be talking about cultivating gratitude, how we can develop an attitude of gratitude with compassion. And then the final, the 4th session in this workshop series will be handled by Dr. J. We got to some of your questions, and I'm sure you have some questions that we didn't get to answer in today's session. So please feel free to email bayarea.ca@heartfulness.org. The Heartfulness trainers will review and respond to your questions. Again, I want to take a moment to thank Ravi Venkatesan, our speaker for today, for joining and for doing this wonderful talk. Thank you, Ravi. I feel like I've learned a lot, and I really enjoyed the rejuvenation exercise as well. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. And we'd love to hear any thoughts on Zoom chat. Please feel free to share that. And we hope to see you again next Friday. So please save the date. And thank you all for joining.
Thank you.